I found a contract in my husband's office. Transfer all assets upon wife's incapacitation signed last month. My hands shook. That night at dinner, he smiled and poured me wine. I smiled back, took a sip, and said, "Darling, I have a surprise for you too." His face went white when I showed him what was in my hand. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. I was looking for a stamp. That is the simple, domestic truth of how it began. Marcus had asked me to mail a check for the gardener, and the drawer in the foyer where we kept such things was empty. I remembered seeing a sheet of stamps in his home office desk, the middle drawer. He was at a client dinner, running late. The house was quiet. His desk was a model of imposed order, a testament to his profession. Blotter centered, pen holder aligned, a single framed photo of us from a decade ago. I opened the middle drawer. There were the stamps, paper clips, a spare key fob. My hand brushed against a manila folder tucked behind a box of letterhead. It was thicker than it should have been. I do not know what made me pull it out. Perhaps it was the crispness of the paper, the kind used for important documents. Perhaps it was a whisper from my old paralegal instincts, long dormant. I lifted the cover page. The title was in bold, black letters: Asset Transfer and Fiduciary Authority Upon Incapacitation. My name, Evelyn Marie Reed, was typed in the first paragraph. The date was 3 weeks prior. I read the first page standing there, my hand steady on the polished wood of the desk. The language was precise, legal, and utterly cold. It outlined a scenario where, upon my mental or physical incapacitation as determined by 2 licensed physicians, all my assets held jointly or in my name would be transferred to a trust. Marcus would be the sole trustee. The house, the investment accounts, my personal savings from my mother's estate. It named Marcus as the sole executor of my medical decisions. It effectively wrote me out of my own life with a few paragraphs. My eyes caught on a subclause, paragraph 4C. It defined incapacitation to include, but not be limited to, a demonstrated decline in cognitive faculties, persistent confusion, or a diagnosis of any neurological disorder that impairs judgment. A memory surfaced, clear and sharp. 3 weeks and 1 day ago, over breakfast, I had mentioned a dizzy spell I'd had while gardening. A fleeting thing, gone in seconds. I had laughed it off. "Too much sun," I said. Marcus had looked up from his tablet, his expression one of mild, performative concern. "You should get that checked, Eve," he'd said, before returning to his screen. The document was dated the next day. A chill started in my stomach and radiated outward until my fingertips were numb. I heard the blood rushing in my ears. I turned the page. It was notarized. His signature was there, firm and familiar. Mine was not. This was a unilateral plan. I did not cry. I did not scream. A profound silence settled over me, dense and heavy. I methodically reread each clause. The document anticipated everything. It referenced the power of attorney I had granted him years ago, twisting its intent. It listed all our assets by their account numbers. It was a blueprint for my erasure. The sound of the garage door opening jolted me back into the room. He was home earlier than expected. I moved with a speed that felt detached from my body. I placed the folder back in its exact position behind the box of letterhead. I closed the drawer. I took 2 stamps from the sheet on top and walked out of the office, shutting the door softly behind me. I was in the kitchen, filling a glass with water from the dispenser in the refrigerator door when he came in. "Eve, you're still up." "Just mailing that check for Carlos," I said, holding up the stamps. My voice was my own, level and calm. "How was dinner?" "Long, tedious. The Connors are thinking of shifting their portfolio again." He loosened his tie, coming to kiss my cheek. His cologne, woodsy and expensive, filled the space between us. I did not flinch. "You look tired. Everything okay?" "A little headache," I said, which was true. A pressure was building behind my eyes. I was just about to take something for it. "Good," he patted my shoulder. "I have some emails to send, don't wait up." He walked down the hall toward the office. I listened to the sound of the door opening, then closing. I pictured him sitting in his leather chair, unaware that the air in the room had changed, that the secret he had buried was now a live thing, breathing in the dark beside him. I went through the motions of the evening. I addressed the envelope, sealed it, placed it by the front door for the morning. I washed my glass. I checked the locks on the patio doors. All the while, my mind was a hive of cold, buzzing activity. The date, the dizzy spell, the thoroughness of the document. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was a calculated move, planned and executed with the same diligence he applied to a client's financial strategy. I went upstairs. Our bedroom was spacious, decorated in serene blues and grays, a haven I had always thought. I sat at my vanity, looking at my reflection. A poised black woman in her late 40s stared back. The gray streaks in my hair, which Marcus had recently started calling distinguished in a tone that felt less like a compliment and more like a categorization. The fine lines at my eyes from a lifetime of smiling. I saw the wife he presented at company parties, the gracious hostess, the reliable volunteer, the woman who had stepped back from her own career to support his, who managed the home, who was, I realized now, being assessed for her continued utility. The trust was not for my protection. It was for my replacement. The clause about cognitive decline was the trigger. A few more dizzy spells, a doctor's visit, a concerning word from him in the right ear, and I could be ushered into illegal shadows, my possessions, my home, my very agency shifting to his control, all while I was supposedly too confused to understand. Anger arrived then, not as a hot flash, but as a solid, heavy weight in my chest. It was pure and clarifying. This was the man I had shared a bed with for 22 years. This was the man whose mother I had cared for in her final days. I had built a life within the walls of this beautiful house, and he had been quietly drawing up the plans for my eviction. I heard his footsteps on the stairs. I picked up my hairbrush and began to run it through my hair, a normal nightly ritual. He entered the room, already unbuttoning his shirt. "Headache better?" he asked, his back to me as he walked into his closet. "A bit," I said. "Good," he emerged in his pajamas. "I told the club we'd be at the brunch on Sunday. The Claytons will be there." "Of course," I said. I placed the brush down. "Marcus." He was looking at his phone. "Did you ever make that appointment with the cardiologist? For your blood pressure?" He glanced up, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Not yet. It's not a priority. Why?" "No reason," I said, turning to face him. I allowed a small, concerned smile. "I just worry about you. Your health is important." He softened, the mask of the caring husband slipping easily into place. "That's sweet, Eve. I'll get to it, don't fuss." He climbed into bed, turned off his lamp, and within minutes, his breathing evened out into sleep. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The man sleeping beside me was a stranger. He had looked at me, his partner, and seen a liability, a problem to be managed, an obstacle to a future he had designed without me. The coldness in my stomach had hardened into a core of resolve. He thought I was nearing an age of decline. He thought I was predictable, trusting, and ultimately powerless. He had drafted his clause. Now I needed to understand the full effect. And then I needed to write a countermeasure. The first move had been his. The next would be mine. I closed my eyes not to sleep, but to begin planning in the silent dark. The paper in the drawer had ended one story. It was time to start another. I did not sleep. The hours between that realization and the dawn were spent in a state of acute, silent observation. I listened to the rhythm of his breathing, watched the digital clock on his side of the bed tick forward, and mapped out my opening move. Confrontation in anger would grant him the upper hand. It would allow him to frame me as emotional, unstable, a narrative that would only support the cruel logic of his document. I needed a different stage. The next day, I performed my routines with meticulous care. I made his coffee, strong and black the way he preferred. I discussed the weekend's social calendar. I was the picture of normalcy, a wife unchanged. Inside, I was a vault sealed shut. I waited for the right moment, knowing he would create it himself. Marcus enjoyed the ritual of Friday night dinners at home, a performance of domestic bliss he sometimes liked to curate. He mentioned it that afternoon over the phone. "Let's have that Cabernet tonight. I'll pick up steaks." "That sounds perfect," I said, my voice light. "I'll set the table." I used the good china, the pieces from his mother's estate. I polished the silver until it gleamed under the dining room chandelier. I selected the Cabernet, a robust vintage he had been saving. Each action was deliberate, a piece of the set design. This was to be our last supper in the life we had pretended to have. He arrived home, carrying the stakes and an air of casual satisfaction. He opened the wine, letting it breathe. "Long week," he said, pouring 2 glasses. He handed one to me. "But productive. Close the Henderson account." "Congratulations," I said, taking the glass. The crystal was cool and heavy in my hand. We touched rims. The clear asterisk clink was a tiny, sharp sound. Dinner proceeded with the usual exchange. He talked about market fluctuations and a colleague's upcoming promotion. I listened, nodding at the appropriate moments, asking bland questions to keep him talking. The steak was cooked to his specification. The wine was, as he noted twice, excellent. He was expansive, relaxed. He felt secure in his hidden victory. When the plates were nearly clear, I saw my opening. He leaned back, swirled the wine in his glass, and said, "We should think about a vacation. Maybe the Alps this winter. You've been seeming a bit tired lately. The mountain air would be good for you." There it was, the subtle hook of concern, the same one that had preceded the document. I placed my fork and knife down neatly on my plate. "A vacation is an interesting idea," I said, my tone even. "But before we plan for new air, perhaps we should address the current atmosphere." He frowned slightly, a bemused smile playing on his lips. "What does that mean?" I did not answer immediately. I took a sip of water, then rose from my chair. "I have a surprise for you as well, Marcus. I found something while looking for a stamp yesterday." I walked to the sideboard where I had placed the manila folder earlier, beneath a stack of linen napkins. I carried it back to the table. His eyes tracked the folder. The bemused smile did not falter, but I saw a minute tightening at the corners of his eyes. "More paperwork. Can it wait?" "I don't believe it can." I remained standing. I opened the folder, extracted the document, and laid it on the table between our plates. I smoothed the page with my palm. The dining room light glinted off the notary's embossed seal. "This seems to be a rather significant piece of planning you undertook. Last month, the day after I mentioned a dizzy spell." All color drained from his face. It was not a gradual fade. It was a swift retreat, leaving his skin a pale, waxy shade. His eyes dropped to the paper, then flew back to my face. "Evelyn, where did you get that?" "From your desk, as I said. Asset transfer and fiduciary authority upon incapacitation." I read the title aloud, each word crisp and clear. "It's quite comprehensive. You've thought of everything. My cognitive faculties, my potential neurological decline. You even listed my mother's IRA account. I had forgotten the number. You remembered." He set his wine glass down. It connected with the tabletop with a small, unsteady tap. "It's not what you think." "What is it then?" I asked. I kept my hands on the back of my chair, my posture straight. "Please, explain it to me. Explain why my husband of 22 years found it necessary to draft, sign, and notarize a document that would legally dispossess me if I became ill. Explain the timing." He pushed his chair back, standing up. He began to pace the length of the rug behind his seat. "It's a contingency plan, Eve, a legal formality for our protection. You know how complicated these things get if there's an emergency. I was just getting our affairs in order." "Our affairs?" I tapped the paper. "This order's asterisk my affairs out of my hands and into yours, exclusively, permanently. There is no our in this document, Marcus. There is you, and there is a version of me that has been declared incompetent. I never signed this. You did this alone." "It's standard." His voice rose, taking on a defensive, pleading edge. "People do this all the time. It's responsible estate planning." "Is it?" I leaned forward slightly. "Then why was it hidden? Why was it filed behind your stationery, dated the day after a minor health mention? If this was a standard, responsible joint plan, we would have discussed it. We would have signed it together at the lawyer's office. This was a secret, Marcus, a secret you kept from me." He stopped packing. He braced his hands on the back of his chair, knuckles white. The facade was cracking, and panic was seeping through the fissures. "I was going to tell you. I wanted to have all the details finalized first. I didn't want to worry you." "You didn't want to worry me," I repeated. letting the absurdity of the statement hang in the air. I looked at him, this man I had loved, and I saw a stranger scrambling. So you instead chose to construct a legal mechanism that would allow you to sideline me completely. That is your idea of sparing me worry. You're twisting it, he snapped, anger finally overriding the panic. You're making it sound sinister. Define it for me, then. Use plain language. What is the purpose of this clause, Marcus? He was silent. His jaw worked. He could not articulate a benign purpose because there was none. The silence was its own confession. I nodded slowly. I see. I picked up the document, carefully returning it to the folder. Well, here is my position. I do not consent to this. I consider it a fundamental betrayal, and it changes everything. What are you going to do? The question was sharp, laced with a new fear of exposure, of consequence. I haven't decided yet, I said, which was true in its specifics. But you should know this. The woman you thought you could quietly usher into a corner of irrelevance no longer exists. You saw to that. I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving him standing amid the ruins of the dinner he had orchestrated. I climbed the stairs, went into the guest bedroom, and closed the door. I did not lock it. The message was in the action itself. I listened. I heard nothing from downstairs for a long time. Then, the faint sounds of him clearing the table, the clatter of dishes carried to the kitchen. The performance of normalcy was over. He was now alone in the theater with no audience but himself, cleaning up a mess of his own making. I sat on the edge of the bed, the folder in my lap. The first move was complete. I had taken his secret and made it our shared, poisonous truth. The shock was his now. The next step would require a different kind of strength. I picked up my phone from the nightstand. My thumb hovered over the screen, then navigated to my contacts. I found the entry I needed. Gloria. I did not call. Not yet. I simply looked at the name, a point of light in the dark. Tomorrow I would go to her. Tonight I let the silence of the house, now fractured and cold, settle around me. The taste of the wine was gone from my mouth, replaced by the clean, metallic flavor of resolve. The guest bedroom was a space for visitors, decorated in neutral tones. It had never felt like mine until that night. I sat on the bed until the house fell into a deep silence. Only then did I allow the careful control I had maintained to fracture. My hands shook. I pressed them flat against the comforter, watching the tremors until they stilled. The anger was a steady burn, but beneath it flowed a cold current of grief. It was for the man I thought I knew, for the years I had believed in, for the future that had been a lie. I let it wash over me, silent and private. By the time the first gray light filtered through the blinds, the grief had receded, leaving behind a hardened resolve, like sediment settled at the bottom of a stream. I showered and dressed before I heard Marcus stir. I needed to be gone before the awkward morning after could begin. I left the guest room and walked downstairs. He was in the kitchen, already in his robe, pouring coffee. He looked up, his face drawn. "Eve, we need to talk." "Not now," I said, my voice flat. I collected my purse and car keys from the hook by the door. "Where are you going?" "Out." "Evelyn, please, let me explain properly." He took a step toward me, but I held up a hand. "You had a month to explain. You chose to file a document instead. There is nothing to discuss until I decide what happens next." I opened the front door. "I will be back later." I did not wait for a response. The morning air was cool and clean. I drove without a specific destination for 10 minutes, just putting distance between myself and that house. Then I pulled over and sent a text to Gloria. "Can I come over? It's important." Her reply was immediate, doors open, kettle on. Gloria lived in a neighborhood of older, well-kept bungalows with wide porches and mature trees. Her home was a vibrant contrast to my own curated spaces. The front yard was a mix of flowers and herbs, practical and bright. The door was, as promised, unlocked. I found her in the kitchen. The room was warm and smelled of lemons and dried rosemary. Bunches of thyme and oregano hung from a rack near the window. A yellow teapot steamed on the stove. Gloria stood at the counter, slicing lemons. She was a tall woman with close-cropped silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at my face and pointed to the solid oak table. "Sit." I sat. She finished with the lemons, brought the teapot and 2 mugs to the table, and sat across from me. She poured the tea, the sound a comforting ritual. She pushed a mug toward me but said nothing. She waited. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The practiced composure I had maintained for Marcus evaporated in the safety of this kitchen. A sob broke from my chest, harsh and unexpected. Then another. I covered my face with my hands. Gloria did not move to hug me. She let me cry, her presence a steady anchor in the storm. After several minutes, the tears subsided into shaky breaths. I reached for a napkin from the holder in the center of the table and wiped my face. "He drafted a contract," I began, my voice raw. I told her everything. Finding the document, the date, the specific clauses, the dinner confrontation. I pulled the folded copy from my purse. I had made one before leaving the house and slid it across the table to her. Gloria put on her reading glasses. She scanned the pages slowly, her expression growing grimmer with each paragraph. She made a low, disapproving sound in her throat. "Incapacitation clause," she muttered. "Defined by cognitive decline. He's a financial planner. He knows exactly how to weaponize paperwork." She looked up at me over the rims of her glasses. "This isn't just mean, Evelyn. This is a premeditated financial and medical coup d'etat. He wasn't just planning for your decline. He was planning to trigger it on paper at the first convenient symptom." Hearing her state it so plainly solidified the reality. "What do I do?" The question was not one of helplessness, but a request for direction. Gloria took off her glasses and set them on the table. "First, you finish your tea. Second, you understand that you are not alone. Third, we get you a lawyer who specializes in cutting snakes like Marcus off at the head." "A lawyer? I can't afford a long, drawn-out court battle. He controls the accounts." "You don't need a courtroom brawler yet. You need a strategist, a discreet one." Gloria took a sip of her own tea, thinking. "My cousin's daughter, Sophia. She's a partner at Hartwell and Associates. Family law, but with a focus on financial ethics and forensic accounting. She's sharp, ethical, and she has no patience for men who try to gaslight their wives with legal documents. I've seen her work. She's thorough." A forensic accountant. The phrase brought a new, concrete dimension to the fight. It was no longer about emotions or betrayal. It was about numbers, transfers, evidence. "Would she see me?" I asked. "She will if I ask her, and she will because your case has the stench of something she hates, financial abuse wrapped in legal paper." Gloria reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was warm, her grip firm. "Listen to me. He thinks you're a problem to be managed. He has shown you who he is. Your job now is not to change his mind or win him back. Your job is to protect yourself and dismantle his plan piece by piece. You have the advantage now." "What advantage?" "You know his move. He doesn't know yours, and he severely underestimated you. He thinks you're the woman who organizes charity luncheons. He forgot you were the paralegal who helped put a corrupt city treasurer away because you noticed a pattern in the invoice footers." She gave my hand a final squeeze before releasing it. "That woman is still in there. We're going to help her come out to play." For the first time since I saw that document, I felt a shift inside. The cold weight of shock began to morph into a different kind of energy. It was focused, purposeful. "What do I need to do before I see the lawyer?" I asked. Gloria nodded, a gleam of approval in her eyes. "Good question. Start gathering every financial document you can access. Bank statements, investment portfolios, tax returns for the last 5 years, property deeds, insurance policies, everything. Don't take originals from the house yet, make copies. Use the scanner at the community center. Do you have your own bank account, anything he can't touch?" "A small savings account from my paralegal days. It's in my name only. He doesn't know about it." "Keep it that way. That's your lifeline. Change the password if it's something he could guess." She leaned back. "And emotionally, you stay cold, you go home, you be civil, you give him nothing. Let him wonder, let him sweat. The more he talks to fill the silence, the more he might reveal." I finished my tea. The plan was simple, actionable. It was a starting point. The overwhelming fog of betrayal began to clear, replaced by a checklist. "Thank you, Gloria." "Don't thank me yet," she said, a hard smile on her face. "Thank me when we watch him sign over the deed to that gilded cage he built for you. Now let me call Sophia." She picked up her phone and walked into the living room, leaving me at the table. I looked around the kitchen, the drying herbs, the chipped mug, the sturdy table where a dozen life problems had been solved over tea. This was real. This was safety. This was the war room. I took a deep breath, the scent of lemon and oregano filling my lungs. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in charge. It had been flanked by something stronger, a strategy. I was no longer just a betrayed wife. I was a client in waiting, preparing for a forensic audit of my own life. The appointment with Sophia Hartwell was set for 3 days later. Gloria had been correct. Her recommendation secured me a slot in a typically booked schedule. In the interim, I followed Gloria's instructions with the precision of a project manager. I became a ghost in my own home, moving quietly, speaking only when necessary. Marcus tried several times to initiate a talk. His approach cycled through phases: conciliatory, "We can tear up the document, Eve, it was a mistake," defensive, "You're blowing this out of proportion," and finally sulkily silent. I offered no reaction to any of it. My focus was on the task. I accessed our shared home filing cabinet, a sleek metal unit in the office. I worked during the hours he was at his firm. I did not remove anything. Instead, I used my phone to photograph every relevant page: joint bank account statements, investment portfolio summaries, mortgage documents, tax returns from the past 7 years. I photographed the titles for both cars. I found the file for our homeowner's insurance and our individual health policies. I methodically captured it all, the camera's silent shutter my only accomplice. The next day, I went to the community center, where I volunteered twice a week. I told the director I was helping a friend with a genealogy project that required scanning old documents. It was not entirely a lie. I was tracing the genealogy of my own betrayal. I used the public scanner in the resource room, transferring the images from my phone to a secure cloud drive I created with a new email address. I also printed a physical set. The hum of the machine was a soothing, mechanical sound. It translated my emotional chaos into orderly stacks of paper evidence. The morning of the appointment, I dressed carefully in a navy sheath dress and a tailored blazer. It was armor for a different kind of battlefield. Hartwell and Associates occupied a modern glass and steel building in the city's financial district. The contrast to Gloria's kitchen was absolute. The lobby was quiet, all polished stone and muted tones. I gave my name to the receptionist and was ushered up to the 18th floor. Sophia Hartwell's office was not large, but it was efficient. A wall of windows offered a view of the city, but the blinds were half closed against the morning sun. The dominant features were a large monitor, a neat desk, and several framed degrees. Sophia herself was younger than I expected, perhaps in her late 30s, with a sharp, attentive gaze and an air of focused energy. She stood and shook my hand, her grip firm. "Evelyn, please have a seat. Gloria has told me a little and I've reviewed the document you emailed." She gestured to a chair facing her desk. "Before we begin, I want to outline how this works. My job is to look at the facts, the financial and legal facts. Emotions are real and valid, but they are not my area of expertise. My expertise is in patterns, numbers, and the law. Are you comfortable with that approach?" "It's exactly what I need," I said. I placed my folder of printed documents on her desk. "Good," she sat, lacing her fingers together on the desk blotter. "Let's start with the incapacitation clause itself. It's unusual in its specificity and its unilateral execution. More importantly, it's a symptom, not the disease. People don't create mechanisms like this in a vacuum. They create them to protect or enable something else. Our first job is to find out what that something else is. Usually, it's money." She turned to her computer, pulling up the document I had sent. "You noted the date. The timing relative to your mention of a health symptom is legally suggestive, but not conclusive. What we need are financial behaviors that correlate with this intent." She looked at me. "Do you have full visibility into all your joint accounts? Do you ever review the statements in detail?" "I see the statements," I said. "But I confess, for the last few years, I've often just glanced at the bottom line. Marcus handled the investments, the transfers. It was his field." "A common and often costly division of labor," Sophia said, not unkindly. She took the folder I had brought. "May I?" For the next 40 minutes, she worked in silence, cross-referencing the documents I provided with databases and platforms she accessed. She asked occasional, precise questions. This joint brokerage account, did you approve this transfer to a money market fund in February? This line item for business consulting on the credit card statement, do you recognize the vendor? Your mortgage is paid from this checking account, but the property tax escrow is drawn from a different one. Why? I answered what I could. For many questions, I had to say, I don't know. Each admission felt like a personal failure, a testament to my trust. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw her focus intensify at certain points. She made neat, cryptic notes on a legal pad. Finally, she swiveled her monitor so I could see it. On the screen was a spreadsheet she had been building. Here is what I've found so far, she began, her voice clinical. First, there are 2 investment accounts you were not aware of. They are in Marcus's name only, but funded over the past 18 months with systematic transfers from your joint savings. The total diverted is approximately $85,000. The paper trail is there, but it's buried in aggregated quarterly statements. A numb cold spread through me. $85,000. Our emergency fund, our vacation savings. Second, she continued, pointing to another line, there is a whole life insurance policy taken out on you 6 months ago. The beneficiary is not your estate or a family member. It is a trust, the same trust named in the incapacitation clause. The death benefit is $1.5 million. The air in the room seemed to thin. I stared at the number on the screen. It was abstract and horrifyingly concrete at the same time. Third, Sophia said, her tone dropping slightly, there are recurring outbound wire transfers, smaller amounts, $500 to $2,000 to an account at a regional bank in Delaware. The recipient name is obscured, listed only as FCM Holdings. These have been occurring for about 3 years. Do you know what FCM Holdings is? I shook my head, my throat tight. I don't either, yet. But offshore or obscure holding companies are rarely a sign of wholesome financial activity. She turned the monitor back. The incapacitation clause now makes more tactical sense. It serves 2 purposes. 1, it gives him absolute control over you and all marital assets if he can manufacture a health pretext. 2, and perhaps more urgently, it would allow him to legally legitimize the siphoning of assets he has already begun, and potentially access the insurance payout without your interference or questions. She leaned back. This is no longer just about a cruel document, Evelyn. This is a pattern of financial concealment and preparation. The clause was the keystone. He was building an arch of control, and that document was meant to lock it into place. I looked at the spreadsheet, the columns of numbers and dates. The betrayal was no longer a shocking emotional wound. It was a ledger, a balance sheet of deceit. The grief was momentarily scorched away by a pure, clarifying fury. What are my options? My voice was steady. Given the evidence of hidden assets and the demonstrably adversarial nature of his planning, we move from defense to a preemptive offense, Sophia said. We can file a motion for financial restraining orders to freeze the accounts he controls. We can initiate a civil suit for financial abuse, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The existence of the secret insurance policy and the timing of the clause are powerful evidence of bad faith. Our goal would be a separation agreement that not only protects you, but compensates you for the intentional depletion of marital assets. She paused, studying me. This will become adversarial. It will become public, at least in certain circles. Are you prepared for that? I thought of Marcus at his club, at his charity galas, the man of reputation and control. I looked back at the spreadsheet, the cold math of his intentions. Yes, I said, I am prepared. What do you need from me next? The facts Sophia laid out on her monitor were a map of a foreign country, one my husband had been navigating in secret. The drive home from her office was a lesson in compartmentalization. The numbers, $85,000, $1.5 million, FCM Holdings, circled in my mind like birds of prey. But for the plan to work, I needed to lock them away and access a different part of myself, the shaken, uncertain wife Marcus expected to see. He believed in his own narrative of control. My job was to feed that belief until it choked him. I stopped at Gloria on the way home. I did not go inside. I texted her from the driveway and she came out holding a small, wrapped package. She handed it to me through the car window. "Voice activated," she said quietly. "It'll run for 8 hours, just clip it inside your blouse. The on-off switch is here. Red means it's recording." "Thank you," I said, taking the small, hard rectangle. Gloria leaned in, her expression serious. "Remember, you're not trying to get him to confess to a murder. You're trying to get him to reveal his state of mind, his contempt, his entitlement. Let him talk himself into a corner, and for God's sake, don't react, be a sponge." I nodded. A sponge. I drove the rest of the way home, the recorder a cold, slight weight in my purse. I entered the house through the garage. Marcus was in the living room, pretending to read a financial magazine. He looked up, his posture tense, waiting to see which version of me had returned, the icy accuser or the grieving wife. I let my shoulders slump slightly. I placed my purse on the hall table with a weary sigh. I did not look at him directly. "Evelyn," he said, his voice cautious. I walked into the living room and sank into the armchair opposite the sofa, as if my legs could no longer hold me. I looked at my hands, folded in my lap. I said nothing for a full minute, letting the silence stretch. "I went to see a lawyer today," I said finally, my voice soft, drained. He sat up straighter, the magazine forgotten. "You what? Without talking to me first? That's..." I held up a hand, stopping him. "Please, just let me speak." I took a shaky breath, a performance honed by a lifetime of observing real distress. "I went because I am terrified. That document, it made me feel like I didn't know you, like I didn't know my own life." I looked at him now, allowing my eyes to glisten with unshed tears. "I need to understand, Marcus. I need you to help me understand, before this goes any further, before we destroy everything." The shift in his demeanor was immediate and telling. The defensive anger melted into a mask of concerned rationality. He saw an opening, a chance to reassert control through explanation, to mollify and manipulate. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, adopting his reasonable discussion pose. "Oh, Eve, of course, I never wanted you to feel that way. It was just paperwork. Badly handled, I admit. But you're talking about lawyers, that's so extreme." His tone was soothing, almost paternal. "It doesn't feel like just paperwork," I whispered, pulling the clip-on recorder from my pocket and fumbling with it as if it were a tissue. I discreetly pressed the button Gloria had shown me, then clipped it inside the neckline of my blouse, the tiny red eye hidden. "It feels like you were planning for a future where I was gone, or useless. It feels like you don't see me as a partner anymore." He sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. "You're reading intention into a contingency plan. That's your fear talking, not reality." "Then tell me the reality," I said, pleading in my tone. "Help me see it from your side, please." This was the bait. He took it. "The reality," he began, settling back into the sofa, "is that life is uncertain. The reality is that I bear the weight of our financial security. Have for years. It's a responsibility I take seriously. You've been happy to let me handle it, to live the life it provides." He gestured around the room, at the art, the furniture. "This doesn't happen by accident, Eve. It happens because I manage, I plan, I anticipate risks." "And I'm a risk?" I asked, my voice small. "Everyone is a potential risk," he said, a flash of irritation breaking through the calm. "A health event, a lawsuit, a period of poor judgment. The plan was to protect our assets from any catastrophe, including one that might involve you." He said it as if explaining a basic principle of arithmetic to a child. "Incapacitation is a specific catastrophe," I pressed gently. "You defined it so broadly. A dizzy spell could be the start of something, in your definition." He waved a hand, dismissive. "That's just legal language. It has to be comprehensive to be effective." And the timing, right after I mentioned feeling dizzy. For the first time, he looked uncomfortable, caught. He shifted on the sofa. "A coincidence. I'd been meaning to get our affairs in order for months. That reminder just spurred me to action." "So my potential decline spurred you to action," I repeated, letting the words hang. His mask slipped a little further. A hint of the frustration he must have felt for years surfaced. "You want the truth? Fine. Sometimes it feels like you're checked out, Evelyn. You're in your own world at that community center with your friends. You live in this house, in this life, but you're not engaged with the mechanics of it. You enjoy the benefits, but you don't want to understand the burdens. So yes, part of planning for the future is considering all variables, including the variable of you becoming a burden yourself. There it was. The word hung in the air between us, toxic and final. Burden. I did not flinch. I absorbed it as Gloria had instructed. I simply nodded slowly, as if this painful truth was what I had needed to hear. I see, I murmured. Encouraged by my apparent acquiescence, he continued, his voice gaining confidence. This is what adults do, Eve. They make hard plans. They don't get sentimental about it. I was looking at our life with clear eyes, ensuring its continuity. My continuity. Maybe that seems cold, but it's responsible. And the money, I asked almost inaudibly. Our savings. He froze for a half second. What about our savings? I worry if something happened to you, I wouldn't understand it all. The accounts, the investments. He relaxed again, a smug certainty returning. That's precisely why the structures are in place, so you wouldn't have to understand. It would be managed for you, taken care of. He said it as if granting a great benevolence. I let the silence sit again, my head bowed. I had what I needed. His rationale, his contempt, his self-justification, all captured on a digital file. The performance was over. I stood up, moving slowly, wearily. Thank you for explaining, I said, my voice flat now, all the false emotion drained from it. It's been a very illuminating day. I turned and walked out of the living room. He called after me, Eve, where are you going? To bed, I said without turning around. I'm very tired. Upstairs in the guest room, I closed the door. I unclipped the recorder and pressed the stop button. I held it in my palm, this small, plastic box that now contained the unvarnished truth of my marriage. I felt no triumph, only a cold, sterile confirmation. The man downstairs saw our life as a portfolio to manage, and me as an asset that had depreciated into a liability. His confession wasn't a heated outburst. It was a calm, delivered analysis. That made it worse, and it made it perfect for my purposes. The performance was complete. The evidence was secured. The next move was mine to make, but for tonight, I simply sat in the quiet dark, the weight of the recorder in my hand a counterbalance to the crushing weight of his words. The digital recording was a cold stone in my possession. I sent the file to Sophia Hartwell first thing the next morning, along with a transcript I typed myself. Her reply was brief, clear evidence of intent and contempt. Useful. Proceed with Phase 2. Phase 2, as we had discussed, was securing my position before any legal volley was fired. This required more than legal strategy. It required an army. Fortunately, I had one. I met Gloria at the community center during the Wednesday morning senior social hour. The large hall was buzzing with its usual warm chaos, the clatter of dominoes, the murmur of conversations over coffee, the scent of fresh pastry. To anyone else, it was a scene of gentle routine. To us, it was a command center. We took a table in the corner near the bookshelf. Gloria unfolded a small notepad. All right, the team is ready. Let's review the objectives, secure your personal property, lock down your digital life, and gather any ancillary intelligence. We do this clean and quiet. She pointed her pen at me. First, physical items. You have things you don't want disappearing. Jewelry from your mother, your father's watch, your important papers. We can't move them to my house. He might check there. We need a blind drop. A voice spoke from behind the bookshelf. I can take them. It was Miriam, a spry woman in her 70s who ran the center's knitting circle. She pushed a cart of books into view, her expression serene. My grandson, Ben, is moving into a new apartment this weekend. His storage unit is empty, paid for the year. No one will look there. I can have him pick up a box. Gloria nodded. Miriam's grandson is trustworthy. He thinks he's helping his grand's friend store some holiday decorations. We'll use him. Thank you, Miriam, I said, the simplicity of the solution easing a knot in my chest. It's what we do, dear, she said softly, before wheeling her cart away. Next, Gloria continued, digital, passwords, email, social media. He might try to monitor or lock you out. She gestured across the room where a teenage girl was helping Mr. Henderson with his tablet. Chloe, my great-niece, tech wizard. She's here volunteering for school credit. She can help you change every password, set up two-factor authentication on a new phone he doesn't know about, and check for any spyware on your devices. I watched the girl, who was explaining something with patient gestures. Is she discreet? She hates bullies, Gloria said flatly. I told her a simplified version, she's in. After the social hour, Chloe joined us at the table. She listened intently as I explained my concerns. Okay, Ms. Reed, she said, all business. First, we need to get you a new email from a device he's never touched. Do you have a library card? I nodded. Good. We'll go to the library, use their computer. We'll create a new email. Then one by one, we'll go to your important accounts, bank, utilities, insurance, and change the primary contact email and the password. We'll use a password manager. I'll show you. We should also check your laptop and phone for tracking apps. The methodical nature of her plan was comforting. It was hygiene for a digital infestation. The third component was financial intelligence. Gloria had already made a call. Janice, she said. She worked at the main branch of your bank for 30 years before retiring. She still has friends there. She can't access accounts, but she can listen. If Marcus tries to make any large, unusual withdrawals or tries to remove your name from an account, there will be chatter. She'll hear it. Later that afternoon, I found myself in Janice's tidy living room, drinking iced tea. She was a small woman with sharp eyes behind thick glasses. Gloria told me the situation, she said, no nonsense. A man moving money in secret is a man who gets sloppy. Bank tellers notice things. Managers notice. I'll make some calls, just asking after old friends. People love to gossip. If your husband so much as requests a new debit card in a hurry, I'll likely hear about it. She reached over and patted my hand. We don't let our own get financially ambushed. Over the next 2 days, the network activated with quiet efficiency. Chloe and I spent 3 hours at the library. She guided me through each step, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I felt a sense of profound relief as each account was secured, a small piece of my autonomy reclaimed. I purchased a cheap prepaid phone with cash, and Chloe set it up. It became my secret lifeline. At home, I packed a single, unremarkable cardboard box. I placed inside it my mother's pearl necklace and her wedding band, my father's engraved pocket watch, my own birth certificate and social security card, the deed to the small plot of land I'd inherited, and the external hard drive containing all the scanned financial documents. I taped it shut and wrote, Christmas ornaments/fragile on the side in marker. The following morning, I loaded it into my trunk and drove to a prearranged meeting point in a grocery store parking lot. A young man in a university sweatshirt, Ben, met me with a smile. He loaded the box into his Jeep without a word. Grandma says you'll want it back in the new year, he said cheerfully. No problem, Unit 214. And he drove away. Marcus was preoccupied, distant. He spent more time in his office on hushed phone calls. He was likely consulting his own lawyer, scrambling to shore up his position. He did not notice the small changes. He did not notice that I was calmer, that my movements had purpose. He saw only the surface, a wife who was still present, still quiet. He underestimated the current flowing beneath. Standing in the community center on Friday, watching Miriam lead a knitting demonstration, Janice chatting with a teller friend near the coffee urn, and Chloe helping another senior with a smartphone, I felt something shift. This was not just my fight anymore. It was a collective project. The humiliation and fear were being transformed through simple, concrete actions into a shared mission. The revenge was no longer a solitary, bitter fantasy. It was a practical undertaking, built on post-it notes, new passwords, a storage unit, and the quiet, unwavering solidarity of women who knew how to get things done. I was not alone in the gilded cage. They had passed me the tools, and together we were quietly picking the lock. The network had provided armor and intelligence. My personal treasures were safe in a storage unit. My digital life was secured behind new passwords. My financial accounts were being watched by friendly eyes. I was no longer vulnerable in the ways Marcus had anticipated. Now, it was time to test his intentions against reality. I needed to see, with my own eyes, what he would do if the contingency he had planned for appeared to be happening. I needed to bait the hook. I called Gloria. "It's time for the health scare," I said without preamble. "I figured. My nursing bag is ready. When?" "Tomorrow evening. He has a late conference call. I'll be alone in the house. The setting is right." "What's the symptom?" she asked, all business. "The same one that inspired his document. Dizziness. A fainting spell. Brief, dramatic, but not requiring an ambulance. I want to see his reaction, not trigger a full medical response." "Good, do it in a safe place. Near the bed or a soft chair. No hard edges. The performance is in the lead-up and the aftermath, not the fall itself. I'll coach you through the physiological signs, pallor, disorientation, slow response. We'll practice." We met at her house that afternoon. Gloria had me lie on her sofa. "Close your eyes, breathe shallowly. When you open them, don't focus immediately. Let your gaze drift. If you try to stand, waver. Press the back of your hand to your forehead. It's a universal signal of distress. Your words should be slightly slurred, as if your mouth is numb. Simple sentences. I'm not sure. Everything spun. Got it." I practiced. It felt strange, artificial, but Gloria watched with a critical eye. "Less drama, more dissociation. You're not in pain, you're disengaged. That's more frightening to a layman and more in line with a neurological worry. Good. That's enough. Don't over-rehearse or it'll look staged." The next day, I moved through my routines with a suspended feeling. I was an actor preparing for a crucial scene. I made sure to be seen by Marcus in the morning, mentioning I slept poorly, that I felt a little off. He nodded absently, distracted by his own concerns. He left for work with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. At 6:30 p.m., I texted him, feeling very tired. "Have a headache. Going to lie down before dinner." He replied 20 minutes later, "Take it easy. Call scheduled for 7:30. We'll be home after." The stage was set. I changed into comfortable clothes. I turned down the lights in our bedroom. I waited. At 7:45, I heard the garage door open. His footsteps were heavy on the stairs. He pushed the bedroom door open. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. "Eve, you okay?" I looked up slowly, allowing my eyes to be unfocused. "Marcus, I don't feel right." My voice was thin. He took a step into the room, still holding his briefcase. "What's wrong?" "Dizzy, again. Worse this time. The room—" I gestured vaguely, then pressed my hand to my forehead as Gloria had instructed. I let my body sway slightly where I sat. He set his briefcase down. His expression was not one of immediate concern, but of sharp assessment. He was observing, categorizing. "Did you take anything?" I shook my head slowly, as if the motion pained me. "Just lay down didn't help." Okay, just stay there." He came closer, but he did not touch me. He stood looking down at me, his face a mix of calculation and something else, a flicker of anticipation. It was not the anticipation of a worried spouse, but of a strategist seeing a predicted event unfold. "Maybe I should call Dr. Evans," he said, more to himself than to me. He was referencing his golfing buddy, a physician, the one who might be persuaded to see a pattern of cognitive concern. No, doctor," I murmured, leaning back against the headboard. "Just need a minute." "You've been having these spells too often," he said, his voice taking on a grave, authoritative tone. "This is exactly what I was worried about." He turned and walked out of the bedroom, pulling his phone from his pocket. He did not close the door fully. I remained still, my breathing shallow. I listened. His voice was a low murmur from the hallway, but I caught the phrases. "Yes, another episode, more pronounced. Yes, the document we discussed. I think it's time to initiate a review tomorrow, if possible." My blood ran cold, but my mind was clear. He was not calling an ambulance. He was not calling a neutral doctor for an emergency. He was calling his lawyer. He was referencing the document. His primary response to his wife's apparent medical crisis was to activate the legal mechanism for her dispossession. I heard him end the call. His footsteps returned. He stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the hall light. "I've made a call. We're going to get this looked at properly, Eve. Don't worry." His voice was smooth, almost comforting, but it was the comfort of a jailer. "Who did you call?" I whispered. "Just getting some advice. Rest now." He did not enter the room again. "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, give you space." He retreated, pulling the door shut this time. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hall. I heard the door to the other guest room, not mine, open and close. A deliberate separation. I lay in the dark, the performance over. The reality was more chilling than any document. I had given him the scenario he had secretly prepared for, and his response was a masterclass in cold opportunism. No panic, no tenderness, only swift, strategic action to leverage the moment. The incapacitation clause was not a distant contingency in his mind. It was a tool, freshly oiled and ready to use. He had shown his hand completely. The fear was gone, burned away by the pure, illuminating flame of confirmed betrayal. The trap had been sprung, and he had walked directly into it. Now I had not just paper evidence, but behavioral evidence. His reaction was the final piece of proof I needed. The passive phase was over. It was time to go on the attack. The morning after my performance, I woke early. The pre-dawn light was a cool gray. Marcus had already left the house, likely for an early meeting or to confer with his lawyer about my declining condition. The silence felt different. It was no longer tense with unspoken betrayal. It was charged with impending action. I dressed in simple, dark clothing. I made no pretense of frailty today. My movements were precise, efficient. I had an appointment with Sophia at 9, but first, I had a stop to make. I drove to the storage unit. Ben had given me the keypad code. I opened the metal door, the sound echoing in the concrete corridor. My single box sat in the center of the empty space. I did not open it. I simply stood there, looking at it, the physical proof that I had something he could not touch. It grounded me. Then I drove to Sophia Hartwell's office. She was waiting for me, a file already open on her desk. "The recording from last night was illuminating," she said, dispensing with greetings. "His call to his lawyer, referencing the document in the midst of your apparent medical episode, establishes a direct link between the clause and his intent to use it opportunistically. Combined with the forensic accounting and the secret insurance policy, we have more than enough for a preemptive filing." She slid a thick document across the desk to me. The caption read, "Evelyn Reed versus Marcus Reed. Complaint for financial abuse, constructive fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and for a temporary restraining order. We are asking the court to freeze all joint and individually held accounts pending investigation, to invalidate the incapacitation clause as a product of fraud and bad faith, to void the insurance policy obtained under false pretenses, and to grant you exclusive use of the marital home. We are also seeking compensatory and punitive damages." I scanned the first few pages. My name was listed as the plaintiff, his as the defendant. The language was dry and legal, but it felt like a declaration of war written in impeccable grammar. "When?" I asked. "The filing is electronic this morning. The temporary restraining order requests an emergency hearing, which I've secured for tomorrow. But the service of the complaint..." A slight, hard smile touched her lips. "That happens today. I took the liberty of instructing the process server based on the intelligence from your network. Janice mentioned he has a standing foursome at the Oak Crest Country Club every Thursday. Today is Thursday. He will be served there, at the turn between the 9th and 10th holes, in front of his playing partners." I pictured it. The manicured greens, the crisp polo shirts, the hushed atmosphere of privilege. A man in a uniform approaching, an envelope in hand. The confused looks of his colleagues. Marcus's face, first annoyed, then paling with recognition. The scene unfolded in my mind with a sharp visual clarity. Public enough to shatter his carefully curated image, but not a vulgar spectacle, Sophia added, as if reading my thoughts. It sends a clear message. This is no longer a private marital dispute. It is a legal action with consequences that extend into the world he values most. I nodded. Good. Once he is served, he will likely call you. He may threaten, he may plead. My advice remains the same. Say nothing of substance. You can acknowledge receipt. Do not engage. Direct all communication to me. His reaction will be part of the record. I left her office with a copy of the complaint in my bag. I did not go home. I went to Gloria. I needed to be surrounded by the reality of my support system, not the echoing emptiness of the house. Gloria made coffee. We sat at her kitchen table. We did not speak much. We waited. At 12:47 p.m., my prepaid phone buzzed with a text from Janice. It read, "Server entered grounds at 12:30. Confirmed subject on course." At 1:15 p.m., the phone rang. It was my regular phone, the one Marcus knew. The screen showed his name. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. I said nothing. His voice was a low, furious hiss, barely contained. "Evelyn, what have you done?" I remained silent. "Papers at the club, in front of the Hendersons and Phil Banks. Are you insane?" His words tumbled out, sharp with rage and humiliation. I said nothing. "Do you have any idea what this looks like? What it will do? You're going to ruin everything we built." I waited. I could hear his ragged breathing on the other end. "Talk to me. You can't do this. We need to talk right now. I'm coming home." Finally, I spoke, my voice calm and flat. "All communication regarding this matter should be directed to my attorney, Sophia Hartwell. Her contact information is in the documents you received." I recited her phone number slowly. There was a stunned silence, then a choked sound of pure frustration. "Eve." I ended the call. I placed the phone on the table. My hand was steady. Gloria raised her mug. "To papers served." I raised mine. We drank. The coffee was hot and bitter. There was no triumph in the moment, only a cold confirmation. The legal volley had been launched. His pristine world of golf clubs and professional respect had just been pierced. The facade had a crack. Now we would see what crawled out. I stayed at Gloria until early evening. She offered to let me sleep on her sofa, but I declined. The house was still legally my home, and I would not be driven from it by fear of his temper. Sophia had assured me the temporary restraining order, if granted tomorrow, would include a provision for exclusive occupancy. But tonight, I needed to face him. The confrontation was inevitable, and I preferred to control its timing and terrain. I parked in the driveway. The house was dark except for the light in his study window. I entered through the front door. The air inside was still and heavy. I could hear the faint sound of his voice from behind the closed study door, another urgent, hushed call. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. I did not have to wait long. The study door opened. His footsteps were quick, angry strides on the hardwood floor. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, his tie loose, his face flushed. "You're back!" His voice was tight. "I live here," I said, placing my glass in the sink. "How could you do that? At the club? Do you have any idea the damage you've caused?" He advanced into the room, stopping a few feet from me. "My reputation, my partnerships, you've thrown a grenade into the middle of my career." "You drafted the grenade, Marcus. I merely pulled the pin." He shook his head, a harsh laugh escaping him. "This is about that stupid document again. I told you it's a formality. You're blowing it up into some monstrous plot." "It wasn't the document in isolation," I said, my voice level. I walked past him, out of the kitchen and toward his study. "It was the pattern." I entered the room. It was just as I remembered from the night of my discovery, everything in its sterile order. This time I did not stand by the desk. I walked around it and sat in his leather chair. It was a deliberate, silent assertion. He followed me, stopping just inside the doorway, his eyes widening slightly at seeing me in his place. "What are you doing?" he asked, his confusion momentarily overriding his anger. "Having the conversation you've been avoiding," I said. I opened the top drawer. The manila folder was gone, of course. I closed it. "The pattern includes the hidden investment accounts, the secret life insurance policy, the transfers to FCM Holdings, the phone call to your lawyer last night while I was supposedly incapacitated. The document was just the operating manual for the plan." All the color drained from his face. He had not realized how much I knew. "Who told you that? That lawyer? She's filling your head with lies." "Forensic accounting doesn't lie, Marcus. Numbers are impartial." I leaned back in the chair. "You thought you were so clever. You thought I was too trusting, too disengaged to notice. You were planning to ease me out of my own life, financially and legally. You saw me as a burden to be managed, then disposed of." His anger returned, fueled by panic. You have no proof of any intention. It's all circumstantial. A judge will see a prudent man protecting his assets. Perhaps, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder. I placed it on the polished surface of the desk between us. But judges also consider state of mind. They find admissions of contempt to be very instructive. I pressed play. The recording was clear. His voice filled the room, calm and condescending. Part of planning for the future is considering all variables, including the variable of you becoming a burden yourself. I saw him flinch as if struck. I paused the recording. "That's private," he shouted, lunging forward as if to snatch the device. I was faster. My hand closed over it. It was a conversation with my husband. There is no expectation of privacy. It's admissible. He froze, his hand hovering over the desk. The fury in his eyes melted into something else, dawning horror. The facade crumbled completely. The charming financier disappeared, leaving behind a desperate, cornered man. "Eve, please!" His voice cracked. "You can't do this. You'll destroy me." "You drafted the terms of your own destruction," I said quietly. "I'm just enforcing them." He sank into the visitor's chair, his shoulders slumping. He put his head in his hands. For a moment, I thought he might cry. When he looked up, his eyes were dry but full of a pleading self-pity. "I was under pressure. You don't understand the stress. I made a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake. We can fix this. We can tear everything up. We can go back." "There is no going back," I said. The finality in my voice silenced him. "You showed me who you are. I believe you. Now, here are my terms." He stared at me, waiting. "You will agree to the settlement my attorney proposes. It includes the transfer of the house to me, free and clear. You will reinstate the diverted funds with interest. You will cancel the insurance policy. You will provide a full accounting of FCM holdings. In return, I will not pursue criminal charges for fraud, though the civil suit for financial abuse will stand. You will move out by the end of the week." He listened, his expression shifting from disbelief to outrage. "That's robbery. That's everything." "No," I corrected him. "It's reparations. It's the consequence of getting caught. You can fight it, of course. We can go to court. The recording, the financial audit, the testimony about your reaction to my health scare, all of it will become public record. Your reputation at the club will be the least of your concerns. Your professional licenses could be reviewed. The choice is yours, a structured, private settlement on my terms or a spectacular, public unraveling on the court's terms." He was silent for a long time. He looked around the office, his kingdom, with me sitting in his throne. He looked at the recorder in my hand. I saw the moment he calculated his losses and found fighting to be the greater one. The fight went out of him. His body seemed to deflate. "You've thought of everything," he whispered, not with admiration, but with defeated recognition. "I had a good teacher," I said. "You designed a very thorough clause. I learned to be thorough, too." He stood up slowly like an old man. He did not look at me again. He simply turned and walked out of the study. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of a door closing. The confrontation was over. There were no more games to play. I remained in the chair in the silence of the room where my old life had ended. The power dynamic had completed its reversal. I was no longer the wife in the drawer. I was the woman behind the desk, the architect. The terms were set. The battle, for all intents and purposes, was won. The settlement was signed in Sophia Hartwell's conference room 2 weeks later. Marcus arrived with his attorney, a man who looked perpetually annoyed. I arrived with Sophia. The documents were laid out on the polished table. The terms were those I had outlined in the study. The house was transferred solely to my name. The diverted funds were returned to our joint account, from which I then transferred 50% to a new account in my name only. The life insurance policy was canceled. Marcus provided a statement declaring FCM Holdings was a failed investment vehicle with no remaining assets, a mystery I chose not to chase, as the recovered money was what mattered. He agreed to a lump sum spousal support payment, calculated from the forensic audit. In return, I agreed to drop the punitive damages claim. The civil suit for financial abuse would remain on the record but would not be pursued further. Marcus signed each page without looking at me. His signature was sharp and slanted, a contrast to the firm, confident one on the incapacitation clause. When the last signature was done, he stood up, collected his copy of the agreement, and walked out of the room without a word. His attorney followed. The entire process took 20 minutes. "It's done," Sophia said, gathering her copies. "The house is yours, free and clear. The financial provisions are solid. He cannot revisit this." "Thank you," I said. The words felt inadequate for the magnitude of what she had helped me accomplish. "You did the work," she said, offering a rare, brief smile. "I just organized the paperwork. Good luck, Evelyn." I drove home, my asterisk home. The lockbox with the spare key was gone from the garage. His keys had been left on the kitchen counter the day he moved out, a week prior. He had taken his clothes, his golf clubs, his expensive stereo system. He had left the furniture, the art, the shell of the life we had built. It felt both familiar and entirely new. The following Saturday, Gloria arrived with a car full of supplies. Miriam came with a basket of sandwiches from a favorite deli. Janice brought a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider. Chloe came, eager to help. They gathered in the backyard, a space I had always admired but never truly occupied. It was Marcus's domain of manicured lawn and sculpted hedges. "All right," Gloria said, hands on her hips, surveying the pristine grass. "Where do you want it?" I had already marked the spot with a small stake, a sunny corner near the fence where the soil was good. "There." "Then let's dig." We spent the afternoon breaking ground. Gloria and I worked the rented tiller, turning the hard earth. Miriam and Janice followed, breaking up clumps and pulling weeds. Chloe set up a speaker and played music. We worked in comfortable silence, punctuated by instructions and laughter. The physical labor was a catharsis. I felt the tension of the last month leaching out through my hands into the soil. We planted a mix of perennial flowers and hardy shrubs, things that would come back year after year with deep roots. We planted herbs, rosemary, thyme, sage, things that were useful, fragrant, and resilient. We placed a small bench nearby, one I had ordered myself. When the last plant was in the ground and watered, we stood back, wiping our brows. Our hands were dirty, our clothes smudged with soil. The new garden was a raw, hopeful patch of earth in the middle of the formal lawn. It looked exactly right. We washed up at the outdoor sink. Miriam laid out the sandwiches and poured cider into plastic cups. We sat on the patio furniture, the late afternoon sun warm on our faces. "To new growth," Gloria said, raising her cup. We all raised ours. To new growth. We ate and talked of ordinary things. The weather, a new movie, Miriam's grandson's graduation. The conversation was easy. No one mentioned Marcus. He was part of the past, a shadow that had dissolved in the sunlight of this afternoon. After they left, promising to return to check on the garden's progress, I stayed outside. I sat on the new bench looking at the house. It no longer felt like a gilded cage. It felt like a structure, a shell I could now fill with my own choices, my own rhythm. The silence was no longer oppressive, it was peaceful. It was mine. The incapacitation clause had been designed to erase me. It had, in fact, erased the person I had allowed myself to become, the trusting, disengaged wife. In its place, it had forced the emergence of someone else. A woman who could plan, who could fight, who could build a network and wield it. A woman who could sit in her own backyard, soil under her nails, and feel not anger or sorrow, but a quiet, solid sense of ownership. The revenge was complete, but it did not feel like I had imagined. It felt less like a strike and more like a reclamation. I had not destroyed him. I had simply removed him from the equation of my life and reclaimed the assets he had tried to steal. The true victory was not his humiliation, but my liberation. The garden was not a symbol of anything poetic. It was a practical, physical thing I had wanted to plant for myself. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my house. I would make coffee. I would check on the new plants. I would decide what to do with the rest of my day and the day after that. The future was no longer a document written in someone else's hand. It was blank earth, waiting for whatever I chose to grow.